My fiancée left me because I was too broke, then saw me on Forbes. Now she's begging to meet. But I sent my assistant instead. I'm a 29-year-old guy who's always believed success is built, not inherited. My parents were honest, hardworking people who never had much, but they taught me the value of earning every small win. While most of my friends were chasing quick money or relying on family connections, I was the guy pulling double shifts at a coffee shop and freelancing online just to keep my dream alive. A small AI startup I'd been building from my one-bedroom apartment. That apartment became my entire world. I remember the glow of my second-hand laptop lighting up the dark room at 3 a.m. The hum of the fan blending with the sound of my tired fingers hitting the keyboard. Rachel, my fiancée back then, used to show up with food from my favorite diner. "You're gonna burn out before you make your millions," she'd tease, setting down a burger and fries. I'd laugh and say, "Then I'll just make them faster." She'd smile, kiss my forehead, and call me her future CEO. For a while, I really believed she saw the same future I did, one built on patience, love, and sacrifice. We talked about marriage, buying a home, even traveling once my business took off. Those late nights together felt like scenes from a movie. Her curled up on the couch, me coding away, our tiny space filled with quiet hope. But slowly, things shifted. She started getting restless, asking, "When was the last time we went out somewhere nice?" Or, "Don't you ever get tired of being broke?" I'd joke it off, promising that one day we'd laugh about all this. Yet, deep down, something inside me tightened every time she said it. That's when I realized, love feels different when one person starts counting the cost of waiting. And in our case, that cost was about to rise higher than I ever imagined. The first time I noticed a shift in Rachel, it was subtle, too easy to ignore. She came home one evening with a new handbag, the kind that costs more than my month's rent. "It was on sale," she said quickly, before I could ask. I smiled and said nothing, but inside, I did the math. The startup account was running low. Rent was due in 5 days. I'd been skipping dinners to stretch every dollar toward hosting costs. Yet she didn't seem to notice. Her words started changing too. Once, she'd tell her friends, "He's building something incredible." Now, it was, "He's still working on that app thing." The way she said thing hurt more than I'd admit. I'd catch her scrolling through Instagram, pausing on pictures of her college friends vacationing in Greece or flashing diamond rings. "Babe, we'll get there," I'd reassure her, half for her, half for myself. She'd sigh, twirl her wine glass, and say, "Yeah, but when?" The walls of my apartment seemed to close in after those conversations. The hum of the old fridge became louder, more irritating. The same for white walls that once symbolized focus now felt like a cage. I could feel her pulling a wee knot in arguments, but in silence. She stopped asking about my progress. She started dressing up more, meeting old friends, coming home late. One night, as I worked through a stubborn bug in the code, she said from across the room, "You know, not everyone wants to struggle forever." I looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer, just stared at her phone, the blue light flickering across her face. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat staring at my code, realizing the woman who once believed in me was slowly falling in love with the idea of someone else, someone who'd already made it. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd already decided where her future was heading. And it wasn't with MIT all came to a head the night we had dinner at her parents' house. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where every driveway had a polished car and every conversation revolved around promotions and property values. I wore my only decent blazer, trying to look the part, but I could feel the judgment before I even sat down. Her father, a man who'd made his fortune in real estate, wasted no time. "So, how's that little app of yours coming along?" he asked, his tone carrying a polite sneer. Rachel froze mid-bite. It's actually growing, I said carefully. We just started beta testing. He chuckled, slicing his steak. Beta testing doesn't pay the bills, son. Maybe it's time you get a real job. The table went silent. Rachel didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. On the drive home, I tried to laugh it off. Guess he's not much of a tech guy, I said. But Rachel's expression stayed hard. I can't keep doing this, she said quietly. Doing what? This, living like college kids. Waiting for you to make it. I need stability, not promises. Her words hit harder than any insult her father could have thrown. I tried reasoning, explaining how close we were to securing a small investor. Just give me a little more time, I pleaded. A few months, Sue shook her head. I've already given you years. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every moment, every late-night meal she brought me, every promise we made about the future. By morning, her side of the closet was empty. No note, no goodbye. Just a half-drunk cup of coffee and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. That's when I realized Rachel hadn't just walked away from me. She'd walked away from the man I was still becoming. And I swore. One day, she'd regret that choice when Rachel left. The silence in that apartment became unbearable. It was the kind of silence that hums in your ears, where even the smallest sound a keyboard click, a car passing outside feels like an intrusion. I sat on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes and her leftover coffee mug, still stained with lipstick. Every corner of the room smelled like her perfume. Every memory clawed at my chest. For days, I couldn't bring myself to code. I'd open my laptop, stare at the blinking cursor, and close it again. My inbox filled with overdue bills and rejection emails from investors who had once seemed interested. Friends texted things like, "You'll find someone better," or "It's for the best." But none of them understood that it wasn't just losing Rachel. I'd lost the version of myself that believed everything would work out. One night, after 2 straight days without sleep, I looked at my reflection in the black screen of my monitor. My eyes were hollow, beard uneven, shirt wrinkled. I said out loud, "You're becoming the failure she thought you were." Hearing my own voice echo in that tiny space broke something inside me. I slammed my hands on the desk, opened my code editor, and started typing like a man possessed. If pain was all I had left, I was going to turn it into progress. Hours bled into days. I lived on instant noodles and caffeine. Rewriting the entire system architecture of my app from scratch. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped replying to texts. I didn't care about sleep or food. I just wanted to build, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to focus again. Not peace, but purpose. Because deep down, I knew if I couldn't win her back, I'd make sure she'd remember the man she walked away from, even if it meant burning myself out to prove her wrong. 3 months later, something shifted. It started with an email, one of those messages you almost delete because it looks too good to be real. The subject line read, "Interested in your automation prototype." I opened it, expecting another scam, but it was from an angel investor based in Austin. He'd stumbled across my app on a tech forum and wanted to talk funding. My heart pounded. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. I barely slept that night, rehearsing every answer I might give. The next morning, I joined the video call in a wrinkled shirt and shaky hands. The man on the other end listened quietly as I walked him through my demo. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You've got something here. You just need runway." That single sentence changed everything. Within 2 weeks, he wired the first round of funding just enough to expand operations. I hired 2 developers and a marketing consultant. The apartment that once felt like a graveyard now buzzed with life again. Code reviews, brainstorming sessions, pizza boxes. Laughter. Every milestone felt surreal. The app gained traction fast, especially among freelancers desperate to automate their workflow. By the end of the quarter, we hit 10,000 downloads. Blogs started mentioning us. A startup magazine reached out for a short feature. Yet even in the middle of this whirlwind, I couldn't forget Rachel. I'd catch myself imagining what she'd say if she saw me now. Maybe she'd still call it luck. Maybe she'd finally admit she'd been wrong. But I didn't chase the thought. I buried it under deadlines and growth charts, pretending success had filled the void she left behind. The truth. Every late-night update, every sale notification that pinged my phone, wasn't joy I felt. It was vengeance, disguised as motivation, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger and much darker. A year after Rachel left, I found myself standing in a crowded ballroom at a tech networking event in San Francisco, dressed in a tailored suit I could finally afford. The room shimmered with ambition, glasses clinking, cameras flashing, deals being whispered between people who used to ignore my emails. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like I belonged. I was mid-conversation with a potential investor when I heard a laugh behind me, familiar, sharp, unforgettable. I turned, and there she was, Rachel, dressed in a sleek black dress, hand in hand with a man I instantly recognized from social media, her new boyfriend. A flashy real estate agent who flaunted wealth like a personality trait. Our eyes met for a brief second. Her smile faltered, then returned, but not before I saw the flicker of shock. I nodded politely, keeping my composure, but inside, every nerve in my body buzzed. I wanted to tell her everything, how the broke fiancé she left behind now had a 7-figure valuation, a growing team, and investors lined up. But I didn't. I just said, "Rachel, it's been a while." She blinked, pretending casual surprise. "Wow, you look different." "Guess beta testing paid off," I said, unable to hide the edge in my voice. Her boyfriend cut in with a smug grin. "You're the tech guy, right? Rachel told me about your little app." I smiled. "Yeah, that little app just landed on Forbes' radar." His grin faded. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. That night, after I left the event, I sat in my hotel room, scrolling through my phone. There it was, my name, freshly listed on Forbes 30 Under 30. I stared at it, emotionless. It wasn't joy or pride I felt. It was something colder, because the moment she saw that list, I knew everything between us would come full circle. And sure enough, a message from her was already waiting in my inbox from that night forward. Everything changed. My phone turned into a non-stop explosion of notifications, interview requests, partnership offers, event invites. The same investors who once ghosted me were now desperate to collaborate. Overnight, my name became synonymous with the kind of startup success story people romanticize. The broke dreamer who made it. But to me, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was survival turned spectacle. I remember walking into our new office for the first time, polished floors, glass walls, a skyline view that made my old apartment look like a prison cell. My team cheered when I showed up, cameras flashing for our social media launch. They called me boss. I smiled for photos, shook hands, played the part. But somewhere beneath the applause, I still heard Rachel's voice saying, "Not everyone wants to struggle forever." Weeks later, the Forbes article went live. My inbox blew up. Reporters, old classmates, distant relatives, suddenly so proud of me. But one message stood out in that endless flood. Her name? Rachel M. The subject line was simple. "I saw your article's smiley face. I didn't open it." Not yet. Instead, I clicked on her social media. She was still with the same guy, posting filtered smiles and brunches by the beach. But the captions were different now, fewer hearts. More vague quotes about timing and second chances. It was almost too easy to read between the lines. That night, I sat in my office, city lights flickering through the window, thinking about how strange life is. How the same people who once made you feel small will eventually kneel to your growth, not out of love, but out of regret. I poured myself a drink. Finally opening her email. "Hey," it began. "Just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. You've come so far. We should catch up sometime." I smirked, staring at her words. And in that moment, I realized this was my chance to rewrite the ending she thought she controlled. I read her email 3 times, each pass peeling back a different layer of meaning. The words were simple, polite, even affectionate, but I could feel the undertone of regret pulsing between the lines. "We should catch up sometime." Translation: now that you're someone, I remember who you are. For a moment, I hovered over the reply button. Part of me wanted to unload years of pain into that box every sleepless night. Every humiliating rejection, every time her voice echoed in my head, telling me I wasn't enough. But I didn't. Revenge deserved precision, not emotion. So instead, I wrote a calm, calculated reply. "Hey Rachel, great to hear from you. My assistant handles my calendar now. She set something up for next week. No warmth, no nostalgia, just business." I hit send and sat back, smiling. The power dynamic had flipped completely, and I wanted her to feel it. The next few days felt like a quiet prelude to something inevitable. My assistant, Claire, a sharp and composed woman who'd seen me through the worst and best of it, raised an eyebrow when I told her to schedule a meeting. "Old flame?" she asked. "Old mistake," I said simply. When Rachel confirmed, she picked the trendiest restaurant in the city, the kind of place I used to walk past, wondering how people could afford a single appetizer there. Claire glanced at the reservation details and smirked. "You really want to do this?" I nodded. "Yeah, but I'm not going." She looked confused for a second before it clicked. "You're sending me instead." "Exactly. Tell her I'm busy." As I looked out my office window that night, the city lights blinking like quiet applause, I felt the weight of closure approaching. Rachel wanted to see what success looked like without her, and I was about to show her, just not in the way she expected. Evening Rachel had been waiting for finally arrived, though she had no idea what she was walking into. My assistant, Claire, arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I'd chosen the same place Rachel once said was too good for our budget. Funny how time flips the script, from the rooftop view to the soft jazz playing in the background. Everything about the setting screamed luxury. Rachel showed up right on time, wearing a crimson dress and the kind of smile people rehearse in mirrors. She glanced around, clearly expecting me. When Claire stood to greet her, Rachel's confusion was immediate. "Hi, I'm Claire," my assistant said smoothly, extending a hand. Rachel blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry," I thought. "Is he running late?" Claire smiled politely. "Mr. Carter sends his apologies. He's tied up in meetings, but he asked me to meet on his behalf." Rachel's polite smile faltered. She tried to recover with a laugh. "I didn't realize he needed representation for dinner." Claire didn't flinch. "He handles all meetings this way now. Keeps him focused." A waiter arrived, placing a folder on the table, one I'd prepared personally. Inside were photos from Forbes, press features, and a handwritten note on my company's letterhead. Rachel hesitated, then opened it. The note was short, deliberate, and final. "You once said you needed stability. I found it, just not with you." According to Claire, Rachel's face went pale. She sat there for several seconds, blinking hard, as if trying to process the quiet finality of it all. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just silence and realization. Claire left soon after, the sound of her heels echoing against marble floors. By the time Rachel looked up again, she was alone. the skyline glittering behind her like a reminder of everything she'd traded away. That night, I didn't celebrate or gloat. I just sat in my office staring at the same skyline, feeling empty. Because sometimes, getting the last word doesn't bring peace, it just reminds you how much you've lost proving your point. The morning after Claire met Rachel, I found her waiting outside my office, holding 2 coffees. She didn't say much, just handed me one and said, "You'd have been proud of the silence." I knew exactly what she meant. Rachel hadn't yelled or cried. She'd simply sat there in disbelief, realizing that she was no longer part of my story. For hours, I couldn't focus on work. I stared at my monitor, replaying the scene in my head like a movie I didn't know how to feel about. This wasn't the kind of victory I'd fantasized about during those sleepless nights. It didn't feel triumphant, it felt hollow. Later that night, I opened my phone and saw a dozen unread messages from Rachel. The first few were calm. "I didn't deserve that. You've changed." Then came the unraveling. "I was scared back then. I made a mistake." And finally, the desperate one, "Please, can we just talk?" I read them all, one by one, my chest tightening with every sentence. She sounded human again, fragile, broken, real. For a brief second, I almost replied. But then I remembered the man I used to be, the one who begged her for more time, for faith, for love she never offered. So instead, I did what she had done to me once. Nothing. I left her messages on read and went back to work. Every unread notification on my phone felt like poetic balance, the universe whispering, "Now she knows." When I finally closed my laptop at 2 a.m., I realized revenge doesn't roar, it whispers. It comes not in screaming arguments or dramatic payoffs, but in quiet indifference. And that night, as the city lights shimmered through my window, I understood something Rachel never did. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. But I hadn't yet faced the truth. Silence doesn't heal you. It only hides the wound until you're brave enough to look at it again. Weeks passed, and the noise of success grew quieter. The interviews slowed, the headlines faded, and I was left alone again. Just me, my thoughts, and the echo of everything I'd chased. The office still thrummed with energy, but inside, I felt detached, like a guest in a life I'd built but no longer recognized. Some nights I'd stay late after everyone left, sitting by the window overlooking the city. It was supposed to feel like victory, the skyline, the wealth, the respect. But it all felt sterile. The more I stared at those lights, the more I thought about the old apartment. The sound of cheap fans, the smell of burnt coffee, and Rachel sitting on that couch, teasing me about burning out. I missed that version of myself, the dreamer who worked because he believed, not because he wanted to prove something. I didn't want her back. Not anymore. But I realized I'd spent years defining my worth through her rejection. Every sleepless night, every deal, every milestone, it was never about success. It was about revenge disguised as purpose. And now that I'd won, I didn't know what to do with the emptiness that followed. One night, I scrolled through old photos I'd buried deep in my drive. Me and Rachel laughing at some diner, both broke but happy. My chest tightened. I whispered to myself, "You didn't lose her. You lost yourself trying to make her regret it." For the first time in years, I closed my laptop early. No code, no emails, no noise, just quiet acceptance. That night, I didn't dream about money, fame, or Rachel. I dreamt about peace, something I'd never chased before, but I didn't know then that peace has a way of finding you only after you face the storm head-on. And mine wasn't done with me yet. Months later, I stood backstage at a packed entrepreneurship conference. Mic clipped to my collar, palms steady for the first time in a long time. Rows of bright lights and murmuring anticipation stretched before me. The kind of moment I used to daydream about when I was coding on a second-hand laptop in a dark apartment. When the host introduced me as one of Forbes' top founders to watch, the crowd applauded. But I wasn't thinking about the accolades anymore. I was thinking about everything it had cost: the heartbreak, the humiliation, the hollow victories. As I walked onto the stage, I started with something simple. A few years ago, I said, I was just a guy with an idea and a fiancée who told me dreams don't pay bills. A few people laughed softly. She was right. In a way, dreams don't pay bills. But perseverance does. Faith does. And sometimes, losing the wrong person clears the space for you to become the right version of yourself. I told the audience about failure, the nights I almost gave up, the loneliness that fueled me, the revenge that eventually hollowed me out. And then I said something I hadn't even planned. I thought proving people wrong would bring me peace. It didn't. Peace only came when I stopped fighting ghosts. When I stepped off stage, I didn't check my phone, didn't look for Rachel's name, didn't care about who was watching. I just stood there, breathing, really breathing for the first time in years. Later that night, I took a cab through the same streets I used to walk when I was broke. Everything looked the same, the neon lights, the cracked sidewalks, but I wasn't. Success had started as revenge. But now it was proof that I'd survived, and as the city lights blurred past, I smiled to myself. Because some people walk away when you're nothing, and they never get to see you become everything.